They are the guardians of the law, the architects of justice, the last bastions of hope for those seeking truth. We entrust them with our fates, our secrets, our money. But what happens when the one sworn to protect you turns out to be a predator in a robe? Today, we'll uncover the stories of lawyers who turned trust into a weapon and the temple of justice into a stage for their cold-blooded crimes. Lin Wood cultivated a persona as a fearless, high-stakes defamation lawyer, a pit bull for his clients, which included several high-profile figures. He was known for his aggressive, no-holds-barred style and his passionate, often incendiary, public statements. He was a lawyer who seemed to relish conflict, building a career on fighting public battles and winning large settlements for those he believed were wronged. This aggressive energy, however, spiraled into a series of increasingly erratic and unprofessional actions, culminating in a professional downfall tied to his attempts to challenge the 2020 election results and other questionable conduct. He filed numerous lawsuits filled with conspiracy theories and false information, actions that courts across the country deemed frivolous and unprofessional. His conduct grew so alarming that he faced sanctions and multiple disbarment proceedings. While the initial prompt mentioned a prison sentence for fraud, the reality of his downfall was a professional exile of his own making. In 2023, facing certain disbarment for his conduct, which included leaking confidential records and promoting baseless claims, Lin Wood chose to retire from the practice of law. It was not an honorable exit, but a preemptive move to avoid the final, humiliating verdict of his peers. His legacy became a stark warning about the dangers of allowing political zealotry to eclipse professional and ethical obligations. He was not imprisoned, but he was effectively banished from the profession to which he had dedicated his life. When a lawyer's personal convictions lead them to abandon facts, evidence, and their ethical duties, are they still practicing law, or have they become something else entirely? Stephen Donziger began his career as a crusader, an environmental lawyer who took on one of the biggest oil companies in the world. He was hailed by activists as a hero for representing indigenous communities in Ecuador in a massive lawsuit against Chevron for environmental contamination. For years, he was the face of a righteous fight, a David taking on a corporate Goliath for polluting the Amazon rainforest. The case resulted in a staggering $9 billion judgment against Chevron in an Ecuadorian court, a victory that seemed historic. But the foundations of this victory, it would later be alleged, were built on a swamp of corruption and fraud. Chevron launched a counteroffensive, a racketeering lawsuit in the United States, accusing Donziger and his legal team of fabricating evidence, bribing a foreign judge, and ghostwriting the very judgment they had won. A U.S. federal judge agreed, finding that Donziger had obtained the Ecuadorian verdict through corrupt means. The fallout was catastrophic for Donziger. While he was not criminally convicted for the fraud itself, his refusal to comply with court orders during the ensuing legal battle, specifically his refusal to turn over his computer and other devices for forensic review, led to a criminal contempt of court charge. He was convicted and, in a highly controversial case that divided the legal community, sentenced in 2021 to 6 months in prison. His actions, regardless of his original intentions, were found to have undermined the very legal processes he sought to use. He was disbarred, his reputation shattered, becoming a symbol of how a noble cause can be irrevocably tainted by the methods used to pursue it. When the pursuit of justice leads to the corruption of justice itself, has the battle already been lost? In the gilded world of California's legal elite, Thomas Girardi was more than an attorney. He was an institution. For decades, his firm, Girardi & Keys, was a powerhouse of plaintiff litigation, winning billions for clients in landmark cases. He was a revered figure, a man whose name was synonymous with justice for the wronged, a legal lion who lived a life of unimaginable luxury, complete with private jets and a sprawling mansion, famously showcased on a reality television show. His reputation was impeccable, his influence immense. He was the lawyer you went to when all hope was lost. This image of a benevolent crusader, however, was a carefully constructed lie, a mask for a predator who preyed on the most vulnerable. His crime was a chilling act of predation against those who had already suffered the unthinkable. He was indicted on federal fraud charges for embezzling more than $15 million from his clients, including the settlement funds intended for the families of the victims of the Lion Air Flight 610 crash. Money meant for widows and orphans who had lost everything. He diverted their funds to finance his and his wife's extravagant lifestyle. The money meant to rebuild shattered lives was instead used for jewelry, lavish parties, and maintaining the illusion of success. As his legal empire crumbled into bankruptcy, a horrifying pattern of deceit spanning decades was uncovered, revealing countless clients who were cheated out of their rightful settlements. His legal team later argued he was suffering from Alzheimer's disease, making him unfit to stand trial, a claim prosecutors called a cynical ploy to escape justice. Before his ultimate downfall and disbarment, a judge stated his conduct was a disgrace to the legal profession. When a man is celebrated for bringing solace to victims, what darkness must consume his soul to then steal from them in their moment of greatest need? For over a decade, Michael Cohen was the ultimate insider, the personal attorney and fixer for Donald Trump. His identity was completely intertwined with his powerful client. He was the loyal soldier, the man who handled the messy problems, the one who famously declared he would take a bullet for his boss. His reputation was not that of a legal scholar, but of a street-smart, fiercely loyal operative who got things done, no matter the ethical gray areas. This unwavering loyalty, however, was a deal with the devil that would lead him directly to a federal prison. His crimes were a direct result of his role as a fixer. He was involved in a litany of illegal activities, including making illegal hush money payments to women to protect his boss's political campaign, lying to Congress about a real estate project in Moscow, and engaging in various tax and bank fraud schemes. This wasn't a single lapse in judgment. It was a sustained pattern of criminal behavior performed in the name of loyalty. The breaking point came when the federal government closed in. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Cohen's loyalty finally shattered. He chose to cooperate with prosecutors, providing testimony that implicated the president himself. In 2018, a visibly emotional Cohen stood before a judge and pleaded guilty, stating that his weakness was a blind loyalty to Donald Trump. He was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison and was disbarred, losing the career and identity he had built. His story is a classic tragedy of a man who loses his own moral compass while serving a powerful master. What is the true price of blind loyalty? And can a man ever truly reclaim his soul after selling it for proximity to power? Michael Avenatti, the once charismatic and media darling attorney from California, projected an image of a modern-day David battling corporate Goliaths. He was the fierce advocate for Stormy Daniels in her explosive case against a sitting president, a man who seemed to thrive in the spotlight, hinting at his own political ambitions. He was seen as a champion for the underdog, a fighter who wasn't afraid to take on the most powerful figures in the nation. But behind this meticulously crafted public facade, a darker truth festered, fueled by insatiable greed and a staggering level of arrogance. This trust he had cultivated was merely a tool, a weapon he would soon turn against the very client who made him famous. The shocking twist was not just that he was a criminal, but that his first victim was the one he claimed to be protecting. Avenatti methodically siphoned nearly $300,000 from his client's book deal, forging her signature and lying to her face about the payments he was receiving on her behalf. His deception was a cold, calculated betrayal. But his avarice didn't stop there. In a separate, equally brazen scheme, He attempted to extort up to $25 million from Nike, threatening to release damaging information if the company didn't pay him and a co-conspirator to conduct an internal investigation. During his trial, the prosecution painted a picture of a man drunk on the power of his platform, someone who believed his fame placed him above the law. His defense was a whisper against the storm of evidence. He was ultimately sentenced to a combined total of 19 years in federal prison for his schemes, a stunning fall from grace that saw his law license revoked and his reputation reduced to rubble. How does a man who built a career on demanding accountability for others become so convinced that he would never have to face it himself? John Eastman was a respected conservative legal scholar and attorney, a former law school dean who clerked for a Supreme Court justice. He was known for his expertise in constitutional law, a man whose opinions were sought by those at the highest levels of power. His reputation was that of a brilliant, if controversial, legal mind, deeply committed to his interpretation of the U.S. Constitution. This intellectual authority, however, was what made his subsequent actions so profoundly damaging. In the aftermath of the 2020 election, Eastman became a key legal architect of the efforts to keep the sitting president in power, drafting controversial memos that outlined a legal strategy to reject certified electoral votes. He used his credentials and the weight of his academic authority to lend a veneer of legitimacy to a plan that a federal judge would later describe as a coup in search of a legal theory. He wasn't just offering an opinion, he was providing a roadmap to subvert a democratic election. The consequences were not a prison sentence, as the user's prompt suggested, but a complete professional implosion that served as its own kind of life sentence for his career. In 2024, after a lengthy and detailed trial, a California state bar judge recommended that John Eastman be disbarred, finding him culpable of 11 disciplinary charges, including misleading courts and making false statements. The judge's 98-page opinion was a scathing indictment of his conduct. He also faces criminal charges in Georgia related to the same efforts. His name became synonymous with the legal effort to overturn the election, his reputation shifting from respected scholar to a pariah who had abused his legal knowledge. How does a man sworn to uphold the Constitution justify using his knowledge to construct a plan that threatens its most fundamental principles? From America's mayor in the wake of the September 11th attacks to a trusted presidential advisor, Rudy Giuliani's career was a study in public service and legal authority. He was a former federal prosecutor who took down mob bosses, a figure whose name was once synonymous with law and order. His reputation was that of a tough, unyielding enforcer of justice. This storied legacy, however, entered a dark and tumultuous final chapter, one that would see his professional life systematically dismantled, not by a criminal enterprise, but by his own actions in service of a political cause. Following the 2020 election, Giuliani spearheaded a legal campaign to overturn the results, a campaign that devolved into a series of baseless claims and what courts would later describe as outright falsehoods. He stood before the nation and in courtrooms, promoting conspiracy theories and presenting what was repeatedly determined to be fabricated evidence of widespread fraud. This was not just a legal argument. It was an assault on the democratic process, orchestrated by a licensed officer of the court. The consequences were swift and severe. He was not convicted of fraud in a criminal court for these specific actions, but he faced a far-reaching professional and financial reckoning. He was disbarred in New York and Washington, D.C., for making demonstrably false and misleading statements to courts, lawmakers, and the public at large. In a separate, devastating civil lawsuit, he was found liable for defamation against 2 Georgia election workers, ordered to pay $148 million in damages for the torrent of abuse his lies had unleashed upon them. His actions, a judge noted, were a profound betrayal of the duties of a lawyer. When a man who once prosecuted criminals uses his legal authority to undermine the very foundations of law, what remains of his legacy but a cautionary tale of squandered trust? Mark Geragos was a name whispered in the halls of power and celebrity. As one of Los Angeles' most high-profile defense attorneys, he represented a roster of famous clients, from musicians to politicians, building a reputation as a shrewd, effective, and media-savvy legal gladiator. He was the man you called when your reputation was on the line, an expert navigator of public relations crises and complex legal battles. His presence alone signaled that a case was significant. This reputation for sharp legal maneuvering, however, crossed a critical ethical line, pulling him into the vortex of another disgraced lawyer's criminal enterprise. Geragos became an unindicted co-conspirator in Michael Avenatti's audacious scheme to extort millions from Nike. While Avenatti was the aggressive frontman, Geragos was implicated as the seasoned legal mind providing counsel, fully aware of the illicit nature of the shakedown. The betrayal here was not against a single client, but against the very principles of the legal profession. He knew the plot was an extortion attempt, yet he participated in the negotiations. In a move that sent shockwaves through the legal community, Geragos, to avoid prosecution, struck a deal. While he was never charged, his involvement was laid bare in court documents, leading to a temporary suspension from practicing law and a probationary sentence. According to reports from Reuters, his name was intrinsically linked to the crime, forever tainting his legacy. The damage to his once sterling reputation was immense and permanent. He had built a career defending the accused, but now he was inextricably linked to a criminal conspiracy. Where is the line between aggressive legal tactics and active participation in a crime? And how did a lawyer of his stature so catastrophically misjudge it? Each of these cases strikes a blow not only to the victims, who lose money, faith, and a sense of security, but also to our collective trust in the justice system. When those meant to be its pillars become its wrecking balls, cracks form in the walls of the temple of justice. These individuals wielded power, intellect, and respect, yet chose the path of deceit. Their downfall reminds us of the fragility of human nature and how easily one can succumb to the temptations of greed and ego. They prove that the most dangerous enemy often hides in plain sight, dressed in the garb of a defender. The central question is this: how can we, as a society, strengthen the barriers against such corruption? How can we increase transparency and accountability in the legal profession so that trust in it doesn't become a trap for the unsuspecting? If this video stirred emotions or thoughts, share them in the comments below. What do you think can be done to prevent such betrayals in the future? Don't forget to hit the like button if you find this topic important, and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on new investigations. Thanks for watching.